Hello and welcome to this conversation series in which I talk with the leaders of not-for-profit organisations about their experience of leading their organisations through the last 7 months since March 2020 when COVID-19 arrived. Never before have CEOs faced such levels of complexity, uncertainty and volatility, and it continues. So I'm really curious about how the practice of leadership is evolving as leaders respond to the set of circumstances that they find themselves in. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Siobhán McGee, CEO of ActionAid Ireland. Welcome, Siobhán. And thank you for joining me in this conversation. So perhaps to begin with, you might introduce yourself.
Okay, thanks, Kieran. It's lovely to be having the conversation with you, whatever happens next. So I'm Siobhán McGee. I'm the CEO of ActionAid Ireland for the last 5.5 years, and ActionAid Ireland is an international NGO with a major focus on human rights and particularly on women's rights. So I enjoy that work a lot, and I'm involved in various other initiatives too in the non-profit or voluntary sector, let's say in a voluntary capacity, different boards and other organisations that I'm committed to. And one of the primary ones of those at the moment is the Consortium on Gender-Based Violence, which I'm chairing at the moment, have been for a year. And that's an important piece of work for me and for ActionAid.
Okay. So you bring a lot of experience in addition to your let's say your main role as CEO of ActionAid. So I imagine as you have been going about your role over the last number of months, there's been lots of things happening within your organization, within the different groups and organizations you've been involved in. So the focus I'm interested in exploring, what has been the experience like for you? So as you reflect back on the last 7 months, tell us a little bit about what that experience has been like, and those experiences have been like for you.
It's been very, very unusual, I think really deeply challenging on a personal level, to be honest. And it's demanded a lot. And I think when I think about it over the course of the time, it's been different at various times, from the sudden onset and dealing with things and reacting. And then as events kind of played themselves out and things changed or went backwards, forwards. And of course, I think one of the features of it is that we're all somehow experiencing this together, but, separately as well, so it's something that we all have in common. But we probably have faced different challenges or hurdles personally at different points in time, so it's very, very unusual. The closest comparison I could come to, especially at the beginning when we were trying to move really quickly and respond, and recognize what was happening around us in March in particular, it was kind of like being in an emergency situation where you have to mobilize really quickly and just get things done, in an overseas context, but then it changed. So it changed into something else, and it's changing pretty much all the time, which is another feature. So I think there's challenges for us, the challenges for me anyway, on a personal level all the time, running alongside the challenges that there are, to keep abreast of and hopefully slightly ahead of what's going on for the team, for our work. So quite challenging.
So say a little bit more about those challenges. So I get that highly unusual set of circumstances, and then that it keeps evolving, and that presents challenges for your organization. It presents challenges for the people within your organization, and then for yourself. So say a little bit more about the challenges that you've faced.
Well, we work in an international setting, so we're a team in Ireland. We're a team of say 12 to 14 people, but a lot of our focus on a daily basis ordinarily is connecting with teams across different, teams across the world. And all of our colleagues, in that sense, were also are also kind of having has similar experiences, or at least experiences caused by the pandemic. So we have to, I suppose I think of it in a couple of ways. When you're leading a team, as I am, conscious that you need to keep yourself in the best possible space, to be able to do that well. And that's something to be aware of. So there's that. In terms of the leadership we kind of try to embody here would be around self-care. But there's also awareness then of others, what others are undergoing. So I think this is the first time in my working life that I'm aware where we're saying explicitly often, to our colleagues, your own priority is to look after yourself and your family. And like, for example, when people were working at home and with children or other caring, responsibilities to take into account, that we have to accommodate that. So I think normally in the workplace, these things were put to, weren't to the forefront. Do you know what I mean? They were there, but they weren't kind of highlighted. Whereas now we're saying they are. So kind of recognizing that. So recognizing it for ourselves and being open about that where possible is important, because everybody has to manage that. Kind of analogy about being in the airplane, and you look after yourself first. You put on yourself before you can look after anyone else. So that's kind of to the forefront. And then I guess there's the operational side of it, which is like, what does it mean? And the pandemic has had a big impact on the way ActionAid works with communities, with the shutdown and lockdown. So we had to go about, particularly our colleagues in the countries we work with, how will they reach communities? How will they stand with communities? How will the work we committed to, be rolled out in this different fashion with restricted movements? And that's something that we obviously did a lot of work on, and recasting budgets and all the things that go around, the shifts that had to be planned for and made possible, both with our funders institutionally and with our supporters as well. So a lot of communication, a lot of thinking around that, and then communicating what the changes were and how we would manage and respond and how we'd be accountable. So a lot of work, that had to be done very quickly and I haven't mentioned the obvious, which is the kind of just moving out of the office and moving home up and all that we did, really quickly.
So give me a sense so maybe just the sort of kind of three things that real focus around self-care that became really center stage in a way that never before. The move out of the office, the geographic kind of relocation of people in home, and then the third piece is around just the impact that it's had on your organization globally and how you've responded. Give me a sense of what it's been like for you to lead through that, and what were some of the, let's say, the peaks and troughs of that?
I think, I suppose we put self-care as one of the kind of principles that we want to attend to within ActionAid, self-care and care of others. And that means, I suppose, that for me, that means that I would feel I need to do something practical about that, take steps, to engage with processes or with other people in a peer support way, which I do, or to undertake training around leading teams remotely, which I did, for example, at an early stage. And just a general consciousness around awareness-based leadership, which was something I looked into and have engaged with as a kind of as a training piece as well for myself. So it's ways to kind of help me think through what that means, what it actually means in practice, and giving myself the time to think about it, not to set aside time to kind of think about how I am and what I'm doing, and to hear from others as well, because that's where I get a lot of, that's how I process being an extrovert. I discovered that when I did some education program years ago, that I personally need to articulate and air my thoughts. That's how I kind of process my thinking, and hear from others, or hear how it sounds to how it's received. So that's something I have to seek out and make happen.
And where did you find those spaces over the last 7 months?
Well, I have a couple. I mean, I have worked since I became a CEO, pretty much always with a mentor, which I find really invaluable. And different mentor at this outset, and somebody, then changed as I changed, and what I wanted to learn changed, and where I needed support changed. So that's one. And I also have a peer group that I work with every month, which we've established for quite a long time. It's what we call, a safe space, that we bring work-related leadership challenges, to each other, and give each other support and reflection on that. And we use some different methodologies to do that. So we do that for a couple of hours every on a certain day every month.
Okay, so there's a routine and structure to it.
Yeah, in that sense. And then also, just from courses I would have undertaken in the past around thinking around systemic change and education around that. There's a whole concept around called Theory U, which I've engaged with, and some of the mailing lists I'm on, I saw an opportunity relating to that to take a course around awareness-based leadership, which I did, and that was let's say, you know, it was over 4 weeks, you know, an hour and a half a week.
Okay, so say a little bit more about the awareness-based leadership.
And that's where that introduced me to a structure and a whole community as well online from across the world, people who are seeking to kind of improve, I suppose, their own practice around leadership. And we work together in small groups, and the kind of structure of it is basically around 3 elements. One would be tapping into meditation, or, you know, mindfulness more particularly, but the second part would be more, not quite mindfulness, but self-awareness, creating space every day mentally to just reflect, you know, and to be still and to open up yourself to what comes in, you know, and just working with that. And then I guess the third part would be it's around creating linkages with other people, you know, and connecting with other people who want to achieve the same change in the world. Essentially, like the work I do is around improving, or the purpose of it is around improving people's lives, in particular women's lives, around making, you know, improving their safety and improving their ability to earn an income and their overall economic and personal safety. That would be kind of a large driver for our work. So you're allying with people who have the same or similar goals around that, you know, and that's the support. It's like a bedrock of support.
So if I met you a year ago and asked you to talk about leadership, so this is whatever, October 2019, and now, or sorry, November, lost a month there, and now I'm having this conversation with you now in November 2020. How has your view of leadership been impacted by your experience of the last 7 months?
I think 2 things come to mind. One is that there is this sense, or a prevailing sense perhaps, that leaders in key roles are the ones that are turned to for the answers. You know, I am generalizing. And so what I think is clear now is that there are no kind of repository of answers. You know, we're kind of working our way through this. So I think it's important, you know, to recognize that there's ways of behaving, and there's ways of being, and there's ways of responding. But like, I'll be facing into designing or setting in place a strategic planning process next year, and reflecting on how we might have approached that 5 years ago and how we might approach it now. That's kind of something I'm trying to open my mind up to. How will we do that differently in this context? Okay. So I think there's just a huge opening up of, you know, a recognition of the kind of how much we can control and how much really we don't control in the world, in a sense.
Okay. So a much greater awareness about the lack of control.
Yeah.
And was that your experience as well? So if I'd encountered you a year ago, would you have had that expectation of yourself in a leadership position that actually I need to have a lot of the answers here? People require it of me. I require it of myself. The board might require it. So what's your experience of that, your relationship with control and with answers, and how has that shifted in the last year?
I think I'll have to just pause on that, just take a sip of water. I have a dry throat from talking so much. Excuse me. I think there's a couple of things that have shifted, not just that one, kind of to pull it out a wee bit.
Yeah.
So what's shifted is it's clear how responsive and flexible people are and can be to change. And having made dramatic changes is quite something to think about, and how motivated people are to keep going in work terms and other terms and do our best in the situation, you know, around our work and around ourselves and other people. So some of the things we might have assumed, you know, weren't possible. Even the migration online, you know, for different generations, those kind of things, working from home, for example. So we understand we have a much better, we understand much better our capacity for change and adaptation, right? So that changes how we might think about what we might set ourselves as a goal and how we work. Also, because we do most of our work, or quite a lot of our work, with people not in the country anyway. We were always engaging with people in that way. But even so, the kind of prevailing mindset is that the best work is done when you're in the room together. Now, there is huge merit to that and need for that, but it's not as essential, especially if you have your kind of grounding and you know what you're doing and you have your team built. It's not as essential as we might have thought. So we would have spent time traveling and going, coming and going, whereas now that's all paired. Obviously, that's paired quite back. Again, that's around where we put in our resources and our time. And we would have had, another change would be, we would have had that on paper commitment to self-care and that idea, you know, that's a feminist leadership practice that I'm talking about, that the political is personal, you know, so you start from yourself out. But I'm not sure, I think this has given us the chance to really exemplify that and do that more actively, you know, because normally we're working in quite a traditional structure, you know, reporting and deadlines and demands and all the accoutrements of management are really, you know, set up in a particular way around how we deliver our work and account for it, you know. Whereas, so there are a number of different shifts there, and the control one is the one you asked me about is only one of them. It's just, you know, it's just probably the answer is you try to be aware of the fact that you're trying to influence events towards certain outcomes, you know, mission-wise, mission-related, goals-wise, and events will, you know, we always have to have that as part of our analysis. Things can overtake us. This one is quite spectacular. How it's overtaken us.
And so you talk about earlier on about part of the awareness-based leadership is about remaining open to what's coming towards you. I guess that's in contrast to maybe a more usual way of being where we're quite fixed, right? So what are some of the things that you've been open to over the last 7 months that have come at you and you thought, and maybe you've answered some of it there, just about people's capacity for change and adaptation is much higher than you would have originally thought, or there was something in the context that enabled it to happen. Anything else that you were open to that surprised you?
I think it's I won't say I was surprised by, you know, what I observed in my colleagues' responsiveness, you know, because I would have, you know, that was, all the evidence was there, you know, that would happen. So, but still it's amazing to see it in action at the same time, you know, and what people have come up with and how they've been and how committed people have been while keeping all sorts on the go, you know, personally. So that's a surprise. I suppose if another kind of way of reflecting on that question would be around, it's kind of linked to the control question, which is a question of trust, you know. So a kind of a traditional way of looking at things is that we're measuring things we can see, you know, and in front of us by and large, you know, and outputs and behaviors and turning up between X and Y hours and all of that. So that's quite a lot of that is gone, you know, it's gone out. Now we're talking much more about focusing on the end goal, what the purpose of our work is, what we're trying to achieve, and trusting people to, you know, and giving people hopefully the supports to get to that point, you know, and removing any blockages if they arise, you know, and supporting people and enabling people to work in that way. For our women's rights program, which is a huge program for us, with the support of the donor actually, which is Irish Aid, we've moved from probably a pretty formulaic traditional type of programming approach to a more adaptive approach. You know, much as I've described, that the program allows the flexibility, we call it adaptive programming, to try different means of, let's say, reducing violence against women and girls, and see what's working and to hone in on the ones that work, you know, to do, it's pretty scientific basis now, those choices and how they would be made. But you're testing and you're trying them, and you're letting the ones go that are not working really quickly, focusing on what does, or focusing on different approaches, you know, so that you get to the heart of the change much more quickly. So something like that seems to me to be an interesting, we got there because the support of Irish Aid is there. It's not just an Action Aid thing, you know, their openness is there to that type of response. And actually, just yesterday, the Irish Aid's development program, our overall program, got huge recognition in the world rankings around its approach, you know. So that has to be said. But I'm thinking of that type of bringing that thinking into how we generally approach our work, you know, and how more adaptive we could be. Let's say when I come back to that, thinking of how we'll map out our plan for the next, our strategy for the next period, you know. I don't have the answer to that at the moment. I'm just trying to let those ideas sit with me and talk with various people and see where, you know, internally and externally, and see how will we do this strategic planning process, you know, in an online kind of form. How will we do that? How will we connect around that? How will we get the ideas flowing? And how, you know, what process can we put together in 21?
So it's really interesting. So a shift from control, kind of command and control structures to much greater emphasis around outcomes and trusting people to find their own way to the outcome, being much more adaptive rather than being very fixed. So the notion of doing a 5-year strategic plan, which typically were quite structured and quite fixed and very measured. So how do you become much more adaptive to situations as there changes? That's really interesting. And what does that stir within you? So I can think of some people who might find all this uncertainty quite stimulating because it throws things up in the air. And then there's others who will struggle with it. So I think one of the things that's become apparent is that people have experienced the last 7 months and all that entailed in very different ways. And sometimes we're surprised by our own reactions to it and other people's reactions. So how does all that uncertainty, that shift towards trust, that adaptability, how does that sit with you?
Probably it's a mixed picture. I try to work on myself, you know, to recognize what it is what it is, and to see it, you know, a little bit distant, you know, and observe that it brings opportunities, you know, to think differently. I mean, our overall goal, I'm pretty sure, is, you know, will remain much the same around ending gender-based violence and our focus on women and rights. But anything we can do to improve the journey, you know, and the speed and the impact there, we have to be open. So I think this way of working opens up possibilities for thinking differently. You know, it kind of necessitates it, you know, completely. So that's one thing. And the other thing that I think it opens up is a more inclusive way of working. The key for us in our work, or presumably for most people in working in this sector, is that the people with whom we're working would be at the heart of, you know, designing the program, and it's their experience and that drives what we do. Now we have the possibility and really open to us to make that happen without even leaving this, you know, this room. So we can do that. Yeah. And actually, the sad part is that we should recognize that was possible before the 13th of March as well, but we weren't open to it, you know. So it's now on the table. Inclusion in meetings. I was just on another call, which had 120 participants in an online seminar, you know, from across the world, people of different, on the topic, with radically different, you know, experiences and insights, listening to a particular presentations. So that opens up our audience and our way of connecting and who's in the room, and who can influence what we do. So that's one of the big opportunities, I think.
So real benefits that have been discovered through this experience.
Yeah, but we have, you know, okay, we can't go backwards, but it has to be recognized that they were there. Do you know, they were
And,
there, and we weren't using them to the extent that we
and
are
what,
now.
and why weren't they being used to the same extent, do you think?
Excuse me.
What was? Because I'm fascinated by, so I have this phrase that I use, which is called unimagined possibility, that there's always unimagined possibilities in our midst, we just can't see them. So part of seeing them is actually being open to the possibility and letting go of expectations or taking off the lenses through which we view situations. So if things were in our midst before, how come we weren't able to access them, do you think?
Yeah, I think actually the theory U process that I've talked about attempts to help us to get there, to kind of shed the, you know, really tap into our own insights and deeper thinking around any issues, and to create, you know, or to participate in processes that would support any one of us to do that, you know. So I think we all can be burdened down by the status quo and what we what's familiar to us. That's just normal, you know. So it takes effort to go beyond that, and or a big shock, you know, or a big jolt or something else to kind of make that.
A bit like COVID-19, so it just shocks people out, or shocks us.
In this case, but really, we could choose it as well, you know, we could choose to go there ourselves.
Okay. Just if I could come back a bit to so when you were talking about, you know, being open and different ways of working, you're saying, there's a lot of our heads tell us that's the way we should be. We should be much more flexible. We should be more open. We have to there's all sorts of possibilities. And sometimes we have so we react in different ways. So I'm curious, what's shifting within you to work in this more open way? And I don't mean that you were closed before, but my sense is that we're constantly changing as leaders, and we're constantly scanning the experiences we're having, trying to remain open to them. And the last 7 months has been so much going on that it's been really challenging. So what's the experience? What's let's say the emotional experience for you of being open to all those possibilities?
I would say I suppose I see it a bit like the overused word is a journey, or it's something that's not static. It's not a static, you know, place to be in, it, for me, and it can help to engage with other people and to have those discussions, you know, people who are thinking about these things as well. So to create those, you know, to maintain those opportunities and create those opportunities. And also to stay connected to the purpose of our work, you know, and to kind of connect with people who are really close to that, you know, directly. So, you know, the simple truth for me is that these are very difficult times that we're experiencing individually, you know, and we just need to keep that in mind. And I don't mind saying, in fact, I want to say to people that I work with, you know, I find this difficult at the moment. You know, today is not my best day because, you know, maybe not even because, but today, you know, you can't do that every day by any means, but some days it merits it, you know. And to me, that's being honest, but it's also, I hope, given other people permission. You know, that they could say that too if they felt like it, you know, if they wanted to. Now, everyone is different, of course, in how they want to, you know, what they're comfortable with. But it's just being honest about the challenges, you know. And sometimes it's hard because we all have people we're concerned about. Things change, you know. Just the challenges of being in the situation, and it's ongoing. So now we're tired. I'd say is a more general point, you know. So just need to pay attention to that, and to allow for that. Give, you know, ourselves and others. You know, I was in a conversation with somebody. Of course, it was on, you know, on a Zoom or on a chat, and we were getting touchier and touchier. You know, we didn't understand each other. So then I said, something wasn't working out, and so then I said, let's have a quick chat, in person or on the screen. Let's talk. And the first thing that came to my mind was, I just said, let's be kind to each other. We just need to resolve this. And we were, I didn't say that, I just said, let's be kind to each other. We're just trying to solve this, and we were getting stuck in a kind of a thing about the details of something, which wasn't going to get us anywhere. So, but yeah, so I think it's just an important thing to keep pay our attention to, where we're each at, and that we're all not disassociated persons at the other end of it.
Yeah, I really like that, the way, so paying attention to where each of us is at, and recognizing too then that it can show up. People get tetchy with each other, and the kind of battleground might be the task or the detail, but actually it's nothing to do with that. It's something about how to connect at a human level. So let's be kind to each other as a way of acknowledging that. And then the third piece is about you and your leadership role modeling that for others, and saying, actually, this mightn't be a good day for that, because this is, the experience is impacting on me, so I'm not at my most resourceful today. And that's and so there's something very powerful, it strikes me, in modeling that. How have your staff responded to that modeling, do you think?
Well, I mean, I have the height of respect for the people I work with. Really, like they're fantastic, and they've pulled off amazing quality work, and coming up with ideas and coming up with the feedback that's needed. The right question at the right time. Somebody asked. We were embarking on a particular project there back in July, and it was something we'd agreed, and we were meeting about it, talking about it, and somebody said, can I just ask a question? And we had an hour for the meeting allocated, and at about 40 minutes in, somebody said, can I just ask a question? Yeah, of course, yeah, I can ask a question. Should we be doing this now? And it was exactly the right question. And we decided, after some consideration, that we shouldn't be doing that now. So I think they're the powerful things that people are like showing up and participating and thinking and giving a damn, caring about what they're doing. And then it is helped by the fact that the team was established before we had to work like this, but we have new people who've joined us as well. I'm going to say my assumption would be that's harder, it's harder for them, but they've done great too, so that is a difficult, more difficult situation.
Okay. So when you look to the future, what do you see well, I guess, are you seeing a horizon? If so, where is it? And what are the unknowns? So as you look to the future, what does the future look like?
Well, I'm happy to say that I don't have answered that question in great detail. I think we'll work differently, even if we get to a point, whenever that is, next year or whatever, that we can resume more interaction, more interpersonal, contact. Okay. I think this whole experience will see the nature of work and how we work still change quite radically. That would be my expectation.
Okay. Okay.
And whether we can translate it into kind of really imagining and creating a different way of working towards our own goals, changing that as well. Because you could argue that where we're located is only the, it's not the kind of essence, where we work literally, where we're based. It's how we do our work itself that really is the key to driving the change. So if we can bring some of that experience into that and think of ways of being more impactful there, that would be really powerful.
And do you think there's a risk that we might revert? So, when the office is open again, let's say, when the lockdown is lifted, when there's a vaccine, is there a risk that we might revert, do you think?
Well, my take is I don't see that.
Okay.
Not like back to March 2020.
Okay.
Not in terms of how work gets done. No, I can't see that. And I don't think that would be.
Yeah. And then there's something as well about
desirable.
what you're saying about remaining adaptive.
Yeah.
And recognizing actually we have very little control over things, and let's embrace that and let's work imaginatively with that rather than hanker after more security.
Yeah.
Anything else that you're seeing in the future?
What I'd like to see is, I've talked a lot from an organizational point of view, and we're part of a wider federation, you know, and that I've talked from that kind of point of view. But I'd like to see the translation of all of this into our sector. Those of us working on international development goals, you know, we share a lot in common in terms of the purpose of our work.
Okay.
And more collaboration, or different ways of conceiving what our work is and how we work together, you know. And so indeed across not just the international sector, development sector here from Ireland, but maybe between that sector and other sectors, you know.
So when you say the translation of this into our sector, what do you mean by, what is it that you'd like to see translated in?
Well, I suppose I'd love to see ActionAid transforming how we work, you know. That's what I mean when I say how we, you know, how we achieve our mission, you know, that we really think that through deeply, and from some of the conversations I'm having, some organizations are thinking the same, you know. So those organizations that are in a similar mindset, you know, I'm always looking for opportunities to collaborate or to kind of co-create things, or because to me it seems that would be a driver for improving our chances of, you know, having the impact we want. I'm a kind of hopeful person like that, you know, in terms of believing in the value of the collaboration. That's why, for example, things I'm involved in, like DOCUS, which is the NGO network, you know, that's around sharing and convening, and then the consortium on gender-based violence, you know, that's based on that, you know, that we can achieve more together.
Yeah. And I'm linking it back to your earlier comment that there isn't one repository of all the answers and of insight and wisdom that one person has there. So the more you bring collaboration together, the more you create the possibility for something transformative. When you look back in 5 years' time at your leadership experience in 2020, what are the 3 things that you'd like to be able to name then and say, yeah, I'm really proud of those 3 qualities I brought, or whatever? So there's, yeah.
I think ensuring the safety and well-being as much as one can for the team and the people connected with our organization in the first instance is a priority. And the second one would be around being open to, hopefully, open to the possibilities that the circumstances are presenting. And I suppose then the third one would be, I'm thinking completely off the top of my head, but it would be around being honest myself about all of it, you know, honest with myself and honest with other people about where that's all at, you know. So they would be the things I would hope to have to look back on
in 5 years' time. So we're coming to the end of the interview. Is there, I know that you probably reflected in advance of the call about your experience of leadership. Is there anything that we haven't covered in the interview that you wanted, that you thought about, that you'd like to mention?
Well, I think the concept of leadership being positional is one aspect, but I think leadership does genuinely come, or can come, from any quarter. You know, for example, when I think of my colleagues saying, should we do this now, or should we be doing this? You know, so for somebody to have the ability and the confidence and the insight to say, to ask the right question, what I consider to be the right question at that time.
Yeah.
So I think we have, yeah, you know, the construct of your series is based on particular role, which is quite understandable and whatever. But I think leadership, I see leadership in a broader sense.
Yeah, it's much more distributed within the organization rather than just being positional. Okay.
Yeah.
Siobhán, thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming on the call today and sharing with us your experience of leading your organization through the last 7 months, and wish you every success as you continue to remain open to the possibilities that are present and constantly emerging. Thank you very much, Siobhán.
Thanks, Kieran. It's a pleasure. It was a good opportunity for me to think about some of these things, so I appreciated the invitation.